All right, boys and girls, here's what's going on here. I'm going to give you a tour on exactly how to purge the line set on a mini split, and then evacuate and check for leaks and all the good stuff that you have to do when you don't have pre-charged lines. So I've got my manifold set here, and I have currently the refrigerant portion of it connected to a nitrogen tank because I'm going to purge the lines with nitrogen. I've got the black vacuum line connected to my two-stage vacuum pump, which in line is a digital vacuum gauge, and the low pressure line is connected to the low pressure service valve of the mini split unit. This is a MrCool or a MrCool 9000 BTU unit. I've got the vacuum valve open, the low pressure side open, the refrigerant closed, and the high pressure will remain closed for the duration. So I've just connected the lines. I used Nylog and all the fittings. I torqued them to the right specifications. I know a lot of techs just say just tighten them up, but you got to follow the directions, otherwise you're going to get yourself into trouble. And there's the lines up there on the unit, which is mounted above the window. And I'm going to run the drain line into a 3/4 inch PVC pipe to the left, which it hasn't been installed yet, but that's another story entirely. So this has been holding at 890 microns, 880 microns for about 15 minutes. The pump's not running. The valve on the pump is closed. The valve on the vacuum and the low pressure is open, so the entire system is currently evacuated. And it's a great way to check for leaks, but not the best way to check for leaks. Seems to be holding fairly well. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to turn off the vacuum, and I'm going to pressurize the system to a couple hundred psi using this little tank of nitrogen. And then we're going to use some soapy water, and we're going to check for leaks at this junction over here and the junction up of the window coming out of the unit inside. So I'm going to put the phone down and I'm going to pressurize the system, and I'll come back in a little bit. All right, so I've taken my nitrogen and I've pressurized the system to about 200 psi, and I'm going to get some soapy water and a rag, and I'm going to check the fittings to make sure that we're not getting any bubbles. I don't see no stinking bubbles here. All right, we're going to put the ladder up to the window and try it up there. All right, here we are up at where the outside unit comes out. So the inside unit comes out. Got soapy water. We're about 200 psi, and I don't see no stinking bubbles. So I'm a happy camper. If you torque them correctly and you flare them correctly and you get that nice shiny surface on the inside of the flare, and you tighten them down correctly, everything's going to be wonderful. So we're good to go for evacuating and then dumping the refrigerant into the pipes, into the tubes. All right, so we are 8 minutes into our 15-minute vacuum drawdown, and we're at 260 microns, which is pretty darn good. I think it's almost the limit of this vacuum pump. And let me review. We have the manifold set, we have the refrigerant valve off, the high pressure valve off, we have the low pressure valve on, the vacuum valve on. The blue hose is low pressure connected to the outdoor unit, and the black hose is connected to the vacuum gauge, which is connected to the vacuum pump. And we're going to go for another 7 minutes or so, then we're going to shut off the vacuum at the pump. All right, we have been running the vacuum pump for 15 minutes now after we initially purged the lines and then filled the lines with 200 psi of nitrogen and then evacuated out the nitrogen, and that's where we're at right now. We're 260 microns, 15 minutes in. I'm going to shut off the valve on the vacuum pump. And it jumped up to 860, which is not surprising. I've seen it happen before. Let's just see what it does here. Generally goes back down again, stabilizes. It's weird, you turn the vacuum pump off and the vacuum goes down. But that's because the molecules of the remaining bits of whatever's in there, nitrogen or air or water or oil, are flowing around inside the pipes and going to equilibrium. So I'm going to let it stabilize for a little bit and I'll come back. All right, so we're stabilized at 630 microns of vacuum, and I'll change the scale to Pascal, which is 85 pascals, and the MrCool specifications and the installation manual state that 120, I think, PA or pascals is adequate, and we're well below that. So I'm happy with this. Go back to microns because that's what I'm used to, 650 microns. All right. So what I'm going to do now is I am going to turn off the vacuum valve, and I'm going to turn off the low pressure. So now the blue tube, which is connected to the low pressure, is totally disconnected, and I'm going to, well, it's still under vacuum. The whole system is under vacuum. All right, the final step in the process after you've evacuated the system the second time is your tubes are going to be totally under vacuum, and the gas, the refrigerant, is still stored inside the outdoor unit. So what you need to do is simply take your Allen wrench and crack this valve just a tad to put a little bit of gas into the tubes and release the vacuum. You want to bring the tubes just up to atmospheric pressure. That way you can remove the low pressure hose. And if you don't release a little bit of gas into the tubes and it's totally under vacuum, when you remove this hose, you're going to put some moist air into the system because the vacuum is immediately going to want to suck some air in. So you want to put the tube slightly under pressure, but not full pressure yet, and then take off the low pressure tube. Once you've got the low pressure tube off, which I've already done this, then you take your you take your Allen wrench and you back out both valves all the way until they stop counterclockwise. You'll feel a little resistance when they meet the end, and you do that for both. And now you've got refrigerant in the tubes up into the inside unit, and you're good to go. And don't forget to put all the caps onto the service port and onto the service valves and torque them down so that if the Schraders or the valves decide to leak, you've got them capped off. So let me review exactly what we did. We first installed the tubing, put some nylog on the nuts, and tightened down the nuts to the torque specifications up here and up here. And then we connected the manifold gauge, the blue hose to the low pressure side, the black to the vacuum gauge, which was connected to the pump, and the yellow connected to the nitrogen tank. We first evacuated the entire system by opening up the low pressure side valve and the vacuum valve and brought it down to below 500 microns. Then we closed off the vacuum and we pressurized the system with about 200 psi of nitrogen from this tank. And then we checked the fittings with soapy water to make sure that there were no leaks, which there weren't. Then we turned off the yellow valve, which was the nitrogen, and turned on the vacuum and evacuated the entire system down to 250 some microns for 15 minutes. And then we turned off the low pressure side valve and we opened up both of these valves here. And once the system was pressurized, we removed the low pressure hose. And now we're going to do the electrical connections, which anybody can do. I just wanted to show everybody how to do the purging of the lines correctly. So thanks for watching. This is Renaissance Al signing off.